Hi folks, welcome to Matthew's Movie Mentions. This is me trying to catch up a little bit. It's weeks 21 and 22, everything up to the 3rd of June. I'm actually going to make a little change to things around here so that I can try to keep on track a bit more. The point at which I cut off has always been Sunday, so the idea of everything I've watched up until that day, I write my thoughts about, and then I record about, and then I release an episode the following day. It's a little bit too shorter time for me to turn around and get that done, especially with anything going on over that weekend. It's not always possible, as we've seen over the last few weeks, but particularly because I was wedding planning and on honeymoon and doing lots of prep and meeting people. So what I'm actually going to do is write and record about everything up to the previous Monday, and then aim to get the episode out by the following Monday. So it gives me a week to turn around all the writing, all the recording, get the editing done, get it uploaded. So although there's going to be a slight out of syncness of everything, it's actually going to give me time, so it should make it possible for me to stay on track for the second half of the year. As I've said before, I'm really sorry that there's been a lapse in getting these out. Hopefully you'll understand. I'm now back. I am now a married man. I am still Matthew Vose. I haven't changed my name, but Catherine is now Catherine Vose. We had a wonderful honeymoon, wonderful wedding. We saw like 2 films while we were away, so the next episode I'm going to mention them, although they were films that we'd seen. And I'm now back in the UK. There is a heat wave going on, so all the windows are open, so apologies if you hear cars or anything going out around in the background. So the films I'm discussing this week are Atomic Blonde, The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, Arrival, Shutter Island, Spider-Man, the 2002 Spider-Man, Vertigo, Split, The Dark Crystal, Zoology, Basmati Blues, Wharf Planet of the Apes, Dunkirk, Inside Llewyn Davis, The Con Is On, or The Brits Are Coming, Amelie, Emma, The Double, Clueless, Uncle Buck, Bullet, American Made, and Batman Return of the Caped Crusaders. So we've got a lot to get through. I will rattle through them because some deserve more or less comment. Atomic Blonde, which I was really excited to see because I really liked John Wick, and the director was one of the fundamental people behind that first film. The fighting was excellent, but the film itself wasn't very interesting. It really wasn't as stylish as the trailers made it seem like it was going to be. There were some good set pieces, but it was weird that we spent a lot of time with James McAvoy when there were other characters that seemed more interesting, and it didn't seem like it was going to be his film. The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness is a documentary about Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki more specifically, which sounds fantastic, sounds right up my street, but there was no narrative that this documentary was hung on. It was effectively sequences of older men talking to each other and then Miyazaki holding court about his work, but there was no real detail to any of it, so it was very disappointing. Arrival, Jen and Caitlin over at A Command of Her Own podcast, they watched and discussed this recently, and it made me want to watch it again. Their discussion was better than any insight I could give, so go and look them up. It is an excellent film. The second watch was not as rewarding as I thought it might be, but it is really good. It's well worth watching. Shutter Island seemed like it was going to be an interesting thriller, but the plot ended up being really linear, and the finale, the denouement, was just less clever than it seemed like it was going to be. I was interested to go back to Spider-Man, the 2002 film, when, 16 years later we now have Avengers Infinity War, which is the most significant superhero film ever, potentially. It's really interesting to see what is sort of the originator of the modern superhero film, both the X-Men and Spider-Man. It feels worlds apart. It was incredibly cartoony. It was very honest to the comic books, which means it doesn't actually seem like it fits in the modern superhero genre. Where they currently they try to root the comic book movies in the real world a lot more. It's still a lot of fun to watch, but it's not aged as well as I thought it might have. Vertigo, every so often I try a Hitchcock film and I wonder whether that's the Hitchcock film I'm going to really enjoy, and Vertigo was not it. It was strange. The third act twist was fascinating. It was really interesting what the film became. And then there was another twist on top of that, which was weird and a little problematic, and then just odd at the very end. Split was discussed on Movie Crush. They had a guest on talking about Village, or The Village, sorry. And there was a mention of Shyamalan's Split being better than recent films and that it tied into the Unbreakable film, which I loved Unbreakable. Whilst Split is not as strong as Unbreakable, it's really interesting. There's a lot of male gaze to it. There's for some reason, all the girls in it have to lose their clothes as the film goes on. There's no need for it. There's no payoff to it. But it sets up what appears to be a third in the series, interestingly. So, it's not as bad as I thought it might be, coming from Shyamalan after all his other disappointments. Coming up soon on Pop Culturally Deprived, we're covering The Dark Crystal, so I watched it for probably the third time. I always hope it's going to be better than it is, but ultimately it's a bit of a bland film, and the protagonist is pretty much a waste of a character. Zoology is a Russian film. It was strange. It didn't have anyone really nice, anyone that I could root for. Not really sure I recommend that one. It's just a bit weird. Basmati Blues has a great cast. It's got Donald Sutherland. It's got Brie Larson. I knew Brie was in there somewhere. It's got Brie Larson. It's got other people that I've seen in other films. The production values were incredibly high. They're really good. But ultimately, it felt like a weird infomercial about the dangers of genetically modified crops and what corporations are doing to the Indian economy. So, yeah, a really strange film. I'm not sure I enjoyed it, but it was interesting to watch. War for the Planet of the Apes is not as good as the other films in the series. It's not a great third in a trilogy. It feels like it's actually second in a trilogy. The effects, the performances are outstanding. I think if Caesar was a human character, Andy Serkis would have won an Oscar for every single performance because he is phenomenal in these films. So I enjoyed it. It was a good action film, just not as good as the first two in the series. Dunkirk, war films aren't my genre, and whilst Dunkirk is not a normal war film, it is just 2 hours of stress and tension. I suspect the second watch is going to be more rewarding, but this is not the year that I'm doing second watches, so maybe some point in the future. Similarly, Inside Llewyn Davis, I'm still trying to watch lots of Coen Brothers films, and this might be the most bizarre of all their films, which is saying something. I think a second watch is definitely needed. The performances were excellent, there was some really good stuff going on, just you get to the end, you go, oh, I actually need to watch this a second time to understand what's gone on more and take it in, because it doesn't let you in until the very final piece, I think. The Con is On, also called The Brits Are Coming, is probably the worst film I've seen this year. It's a good cast. It's Uma Thurman, it's Tim Roth, it's other people whose names I can't remember, Sophie Vergara, but the writing was terrible, the setups were terrible, the male gaze was terrible, the misogyny was terrible. It's a terrible film. Do not watch this. I am very disappointed in it. However, I also got to watch Amelie, which I have been wanting to watch for a very long time now, and it is as rewarding as I hoped it would be. I knew some of what the film contained, but it was still delightful. It was really good fun. If you've not seen Amelie, definitely go and seek that one out. We are showing that as part of Godalming Film Festival, so if you do want to see it on the big screen, you can get free tickets at godalmingfilm.com. I watched Emma, the ITV version of the film. It was released in the same year as Gwyneth Paltrow's version, but this one stars Kate Beckinsale, Mark Strong, and Samantha Morton. It is terrific. It's probably the best version of the thing I've seen. Definitely better than Gwyneth Paltrow's version. There's a couple of strange choices about what they included or didn't include, but really good. It's a good tale when done well. So yeah, that is an excellent one. Hard to find, but if you do get the chance to see it, definitely check it out. The Double is a weird film I've wanted to watch for a little while. It feels like there should be a moral to it, along the lines of The Machinist, but it didn't come out very strongly. It was just weird for almost the sake of being a bit weird and dark. Clueless, I wanted to watch, having watched Emma recently, so given it's the most famous adaptation of that story, we thought we should. It is still really good. It is an excellent film, but as with other films of the era, there's a couple of problematic moments, and as with other films of the era, some excess male gaze. It's a lot of fun. It shows how to adapt a story very well, so if you've not seen Clueless, you should definitely check that out. Similarly, Uncle Buck, I had not seen in years. It has aged very, very well. It hasn't aged, in fact. You could show this now and it would still be really fun and everyone would still enjoy it. John Candy is phenomenal. This is one of his best performances. I would recommend it to everyone. It's so on point. Bullet, the old Steve McQueen film. I can see why it's famous for the car chase. The car chase is really good, but everything outside of that is a bit strange. It's an early example of the sort of exceptional male films, the James Bond, Mission Impossible, Jack Reacher style. But you can see how they learned from this film about actually we need to make the world more interesting and accessible, not just the central character, central hero. My friend Dave recommended that I watch American Made, which was really gripping. I didn't know the story beforehand, and reading about it since, there was a lot of license taken with it, but it's entertaining from start to end. Tom Cruise is usually pretty watchable on screen, so you can't go wrong with one of his films. And Batman: The Return of the Caped Crusaders. It's an animated movie of the 1960s Adam West Batman, with the voices from Adam West and Burt Ward and Julie Newmar. It's excellently silly. There are sly references to modern Batmans that made me chuckle all the way through, and there's some really interesting cat puns all the way through it. So yeah, that was good fun, so I enjoyed it. My recommendations for these 2 weeks: War for the Planet of the Apes. Wasn't the trilogy ending that I wanted it to be, but it was incredibly well done. It was not a good week of films by and large, but that was a good one in the midst of them. And Amelie, most people have probably seen it, but the visual elements, the audio, some of the non-diegetic sounds, the things that don't necessarily exist, that they use to evoke feeling and imagery throughout the film. It's so clever. The special effects, I did not expect the level of special effects that we got. It all added to this sort of very delightful fairy tale. I really enjoyed Emily. And I enjoyed the sort of French sensibility of, birth, love, death, sex. It all just happens. Let's not be coy about it. Let's just deal with it. So, yeah, that was good fun. I will be back with probably a similar number of films in another week, when I will talk about what I watched on honeymoon on the week up to it. We had Mandy over for a few days, so she and I actually went to the cinema. I watched a couple of films when she and I were out, not together, but on the train to go and meet her, so some stuff to talk about there. And then I will be up to date, and we will be releasing each week, but a week behind, so I will be able to keep these coming. Those of you who listen, thank you very much. I'm really sorry it's been so behind, but now life will hopefully settle down a bit, although coming back from holiday, as you know, I am just filled with, I want to go and do this, I want to do this thing, I want to do this thing, I want to design a garden, I want to write a new series, I want to do stuff. So I need to try and keep on top of everything so I don't get behind again. So that will be my mission over the coming weeks. Speak to you next week.